Good evening and welcome. I'm Steve Greenlee, the editor of the Portland Press Herald. Our mission as journalists is to find the truth, and often the most compelling, most indisputable truths are those revealed through photojournalism. The Press Herald is fortunate to have Maine's most talented team of photojournalists, and they have revealed truths in a time like no other, a challenging period in which we have confronted the most serious public health crisis in a century, a terribly divisive political culture, a reckoning over how marginalized people are treated, and the stark realities of what's happening to our planet. What's more, at a time when many employees have the option of working remotely, our photojournalists have been putting themselves in harm's way for nearly 2 years to bring our readers the truths about how Maine is dealing with the COVID pandemic. We are indebted to them because they help us all see what is happening in places we can't be. The Press Herald is a news organization that is committed to photojournalism. Corporate-owned newspapers across the country have slashed their photo staffs in order to funnel more money to Wall Street. But we are fortunate to be locally owned and managed by a publisher who cares about the quality of our journalism. And that includes the pictures we make, as well as the words we write. But we can do this only with the support of our subscribers. If you already subscribe, thank you. If you don't yet, I hope you will consider doing so. In a few minutes, you will hear from our photographers who will show you and talk about their favorite pictures from 2021 and answer your questions. You can submit your questions through the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen. We also invite you to join us at the Portland Public Library this Friday for the First Friday Art Walk to see these amazing photos enlarged and displayed in the library's art gallery. Here to say more and to introduce our team is the very talented editor who directs our photojournalism, Michelle McDonald.
Thank you, Steve. And welcome, everyone. Thank you for coming. And well, we made it through another year. And I can tell you that there isn't a group of 5 people who would be better photographers to go through this year with than these 5 people I'm about to introduce. The first is Greg Reck. Greg is not only a wizard with the camera, he's a wizard with computers. He's a wizard with just about anything his hands touch. I really wish I could show you more of his photos from this year. I mean, you're going to see many of them tonight, but there were so many good ones that we just don't have time to show. I mean, he went to Becky Steiner in April, and when it was, everything was still very shut up, and shot these incredibly beautiful pictures of things like plexiglass between booths. But he would have the light hit in a certain way and the person sitting at the edge of the seat, and it would be gorgeous. He shot somebody filleting a tuna at upstream trucking. I mean, these normal everyday things that were just really fabulous photos. And he does it day in and day out. And thank you, Greg. We are so happy to have you with us. Next up is Derek. And Derek Davis is, when I was trying to think of how to describe his work, I came up with 3 E words. I don't know why. First of all 5 of his photos from this year's top choices had water in them. And that tells you something about Derek, I think, and his love for nature and the ocean. But I think his work, it looks effortless. It is not, it is anything but. But when you look at it, it looks so beautiful and natural. And you think that you could take that picture, but really he has an exquisitely elegant sense of composition. And his pictures are really evocative. They have mood and emotion, whether they're people or a scenic. So he's just, he's a person who makes what he does look easy when it's not. And thank you, Derek, for being with us tonight, but for every night. Next, I want to talk about Brianna Soka. And Brianna is, she never hits a false note with her photos. Her pictures have dignity, they're uncompromised, they're authentic, they have mood, they have feeling, and mostly I think their beauty is in the connection she makes between you and the subjects and the people in her pictures. And she makes that connection herself, and through her, we feel it. She's, you know, her photos are, I think, very classic with a touch of art to them, and a touch of poetry. And we are really, really lucky to have her on our staff. So thank you, Brianna, today and every day. Ben, when I think of Ben, I think of somebody with a steady hand and a steady heart. And he brings both of those to his photography. He has patience, he has intelligence, and he tends to take pictures that are very iconic, that when you look at them, they describe something very wide in one frame. And that's a really, really hard thing to do. And Ben, like, basically this is true of everyone here. You can send them out on any assignment, and they come back with something that you know can run on the front page. Thank you, Ben. And finally, Sean. And Sean seems to have some kind of connection to beauty that runs through all his work. And he's, it's not only in his scenic photos, it's in his people photos. And he has a connection, I think, not only to physical beauty, but to a kind of joy and optimism that I find in his pictures, that I find really uplifting. And especially so in these really a hard few pandemic years we've been through. So thank you, Sean. And again, for today and every day that you work. And really, I'm going to let them speak for themselves now, but I mean, this is really an extraordinary group of photographers, and I think you'll see that for yourselves in a minute. And Strawberry, maybe you can show us our first photo. This one's by Greg, and want to take it away, Greg?
Sure. So this is a snowmaker at Sunday River that I photographed right at the start of the year, right in January. I had been trying for a couple of years to get up to Sunday River to document snowmakers. Sunday River is well known for their pretty robust snowmaking operations. They often boast that they have the most open terrain in the East. They are pitching that currently, and there's good reason for that. They put a lot of money and a lot of effort into their snowmaking, and they have a lot of ground to cover over their 8 peaks. We were finally able to agree on a date in early 2021, and I had no idea when I said, yeah, that date works for me, that it was actually the night of the full moon. And that is where a thing that we call photographer's luck comes into play, because having that full moon really changed the look of many of the photographs I took that night. And initially the moon was not out. It was quite dark, but as we worked our way down the mountain, it started peeking out where you can see the breaks in the clouds here. We're often asked to talk about the technical aspects of our photos, which we don't think about much when we're taking them, but this one does have a few that I'll impart to those who are interested in those details. Because this was so dark, one of the things that made this photo possible was a new lens that I had bought a few months earlier. It's a 24mm f1.4. That f1.4 refers to the widest aperture of the lens, and essentially what it means is it lets in a lot of light. And in these dark situations, that's the type of lens you need. And the details on this is this was shot at 1/15 of a second at 1.4 aperture at 6400 ISO, for those who pay attention to technical details. And I was happy to, I was really happy that the moon peeked out between the clouds.
Thanks. Strawberry, can we have the next one? This photo that's going to make you smile is by Derek Davis.
Yeah, well, this was a bit of an unexpected photo, as I was sent to a high school basketball game. This was last winter, and I think it might have been the only basketball game that I covered that whole year. But as I was waiting for the game to start, I saw, all these cutouts. The fans weren't allowed to come to the games. It was completely empty gymnasium. And so this particular school tried to, make it better for the kids that were playing by putting up little cutouts of their family members and their pets. And, it was kind of cool. I didn't know I was going to make a photo of this until I saw the referee stretching in front of him, and immediately knew I had to take this photo. I didn't think it was going to run in the paper, but it ended up being the only image from this assignment that ran. And I'm really glad that it did, because it's an important part of the pandemic that we don't have anymore. Now, the basketball teams are playing now, and they have, full stands with packed fans that are wearing masks. But, this is all gone. And this effort that the school administrators and the parents made to try to make it more, exciting for the kids and to make it better for them, for the athletes, was really important during this time. And I think people probably have some different reactions to this. A lot of people were, upset that they couldn't go to the games. But for me, I think it's just a really light, uplifting kind of reminder of just the efforts that people went to try to make it, better for the kids and for the athletes.
Thank you. Strawberry, can we have, yeah, this is Ben's photo, and I think it's one of his favorites from the year. Ben?
It is my favorite, but it wasn't initially. I saw this couple out of the corner of my eye, and they caught my attention immediately. This was at the Ossipee Fair in Hiram. I think it was in June. It was pretty early in the season, in the fair season. So they caught my eye, and I took this shot, and I wasn't happy with it. I shot it on a 35 millimeter lens, and I thought it was too wide. So I put down that camera body, picked up my other camera body, which was a crop sensor with a 50 millimeter lens on it. And that one was too tight. And so by that point, the gentleman there had noticed my presence, and the moment was gone. And I didn't have another chance to take this photo. So I thought it was over. I thought I'd missed it. And regrettably, I never talked to this couple. I never got their names for a caption. It wasn't until I got back to the car and started flipping through, the frames that I had from the day, that I stumbled on it. I just thought, wow, I really had lightning in a bottle. And I grabbed the laptop, and I hopped out of the car, and I ran all over the fairgrounds trying to find this couple, and never found them. So it's kind of a mystery as to who they are, or whether they found what they were looking for in the program and had a good day, and if they're married, or for how long. Maybe they're out there right now. That's my biggest hope, is we'll somehow find them and connect some names and some stories to it.
I really hope that that's what comes out of this. I was just going to say, I was talking to Ben about it, and I was like, it's just so funny how sometimes you'll take a photo and you'll know right away that you like it and it's good. And then other times you just have no idea. I've done this so many times that I'm like, dang it. Or I've gotten a bunch of people's names and I haven't used any of those photos because I get back and I'm like, I don't like any of these. So it's just funny how it works.
Great. Thanks. Next one. This is Sean's photo. Beautiful photo. Sean?
Thanks, Michelle. This is a picture back in June of the Ring of Fire eclipse. This was on the Eastern Prom where amateur astronomers had gathered. I got up early that morning, about 4 a.m. I think I got there around 5. And as I got there, the sun was just beginning to come up, and they were viewing through the telescopes. And I shot a lot of frames. I tried with little success to photograph the eclipse. But at the end of the day, I thought this photo of all the people viewing the eclipse was the best photo. I like the silhouette and the body language. And I think sometimes it helps to just step away from your photo and take in the whole scene. And that's what I did here. And the sky was beautiful. And
I love this little, the separation between the guy in the center with the cap on and the smaller person behind him. It's like perfect. Everybody is perfect. And there's so many levels to it. It's really sophisticated in its composition.
thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And next, this is Brianna's.
Yeah, so this was the baseball playoffs or state or the championship. I should have known that, but it was a big baseball game. I'm obviously a sports fan, and it was in June, so it was kind of my first big sports thing post-vaccine, kind of in this like magical time in June, and I just really liked this photo for like the normalcy of it. You know, it looks almost like any other year, kids having fun, being happy, and I really liked this photo for that reason.
I like that he's flying.
Yeah, also he's flying, so that's kids are really athletic.
Next
A unique perspective. I mean, from a vantage point you don't often see in baseball games or crowd reactions. The elevation that you got here is really great.
Yeah. You're able to stand up at this at St. Joseph College. You're able to stand up above the dugout, so that helps you get that vantage point. That's why I really like shooting there.
Okay, maybe the next one. And this is one of my favorites. We're back to Greg again. This is a wonderful, wonderful moment.
So this is actually a spring snow. It was mid-April. And I happen to love winter. I love skiing and I love it when it snows. But I think even for those of us who love winter, this is either April 15th or 16th. When it snows that late in April, you sort of your shoulders sag a little bit and you're like, really? Because I'm ready for spring. And I think you had called me, Michelle, and said, we're going to need a photo of this snow. And I'm like, I'm looking. And I was in Biddeford for another assignment and I saw this letter carrier walking up a street and I'm like, oh, I can focus on the letter carrier. And I stayed with him for 2 or 3 houses. And as I was walking up the street with him, I noticed this girl in the window and I was like, this is one of those times when I know there's a photo there. And, you know, oftentimes we don't know when we have a good photo, but I'm like, this could be a great photo. So I darted across the street and I waited for him to come to this house and deliver the mail. And the whole while this girl is holding her hands up and just her sort of pensiveness looking out the window, it perfectly matched sort of, I think, what most people feel when it snows in mid-April. It's just like, there's a sort of tension that it brings.
As well as just the beauty of the slow shutter speed, making the snow look so almost like a veil that we're looking through.
I was really surprised at how big and how heavy the flakes were for an April snowstorm. It was coming down pretty hard.
If you have questions for our photographers, we are going to take questions at the end. There's a Q&A at the bottom of the screen, and you should submit your questions to the Q&A at the bottom. And so we'll have a half an hour at the end to answer questions. Strawberry, yeah, this fabulously ethereal photo is by Derek Davis.
Yeah, well, this is an event where Navy SEALs and other military personnel do a feat of it's a run, bike, swim, and it's to raise money for Camp Sunshine, which is a retreat for families of children that have terminal illnesses, and it's in Maine. And they raise money for this place, and it's a great event. No one goes to watch it, unfortunately, because these are serious athletes, and they don't stop. They keep going. But I was sent to cover their final leg of their trip, which was to swim out from East End Beach to Peaks Island. They had already run down Mount Washington and then biked all the way to Portland, Maine. And this was their last leg of that trip. And so I got there, it was absolutely pouring, and it was really cold out and freezing. And I didn't know what to expect, but there were no spectators or anything to photograph, and these guys were itching to get going. So I thought I would just jump in the water with them and photograph them as they entered the water. The funny thing is that when I got into the water, they all started heading towards me backwards, and I couldn't figure out why. And then one of them explained to me that they had long flippers on and they had to enter the water backwards because of that. So I quickly got behind them and photographed them from that side, which actually made the photo much better, because it looks like they're just coming out of the water, out of this abyss.
It really has this otherworldly quality that makes you want to look at it longer and figure out what's going on.
Yeah, and it was cool from the other way, but it had the hill, it had Portland behind them, and it wasn't as graphically pleasing. So I'm really glad how it came out, and it looks totally ominous, and it grabs the viewer's attention.
I actually happened to be running the photo desk this day for Michelle, and I remember assigning Derek this photo. I said, it's really cold, and we're only photographing the water leg. And I remember saying, just do what you're going to do. And when this photo came in, I was like astounded. I'm like, this is why we refer to Derek as the merman on staff, because he will never hesitate to get in the water to make the best picture he can.
I was actually excited about it. It took me about an hour to warm up in the car, but it was fun. Thanks.
Did you wear a wetsuit, Derek?
Of course I didn't. I had shorts and a t-shirt on.
Okay, next. This lovely one is by Ben.
Yeah, I mean, people ask me about what it's like to be a photographer, and I usually say it doesn't feel like work. For this, I spent 2.5 hours on a beach in summertime. It was an unusual story because it was a snowy owl that was perched on a rooftop in Wells, and I stood there for any wildlife buffs out there, anybody who wants to get into photography sort of on the cheap, you can get a crop sensor camera, like a Canon 7D, and a 100 to 400 lens, which is an inexpensive lens, but it's an L series lens, and you can get really tight on distant objects. And so I just, for 2.5 hours, just stared through the viewfinder through a monopod and just had the time of my life. I forgot to bring sunscreen, so I got a little scorched, but it was a good day of work.
They're not always so easy. But this is really, really well worth the wait. Next. One of my favorites of Sean's. Sean?
This was a day of remembrance on the anniversary of the George Floyd murder. What I remember about this was it was a late assignment, and Michelle said this is probably our page 1 assignment for tomorrow. But some of the events that were happening early in the day weren't as visual. So I was getting a little stressed. I was really close to my deadline, and I knew that they were doing this projection. There was an artist projecting images on the wall with music, and I really wanted to see that, but it put me right at deadline. And Michelle said, you can have a little bit more time, but I need the photo soon. So right as the images started to get projected, I worked my way around. And when I saw this gentleman's hat lit in red, and as the images would pop up, I thought that I had something there. And I thought this picture, it had a little bit of red in it on the wall. And I thought it worked well with his hat. And I felt like I had something at that point. So I booked it back to my car and sent in the photos. And I believe it ran on page 1 the next day.
It did, and we loved it. And Greg, you came up with a great title for it for the caption that's going to be in the gallery show. You want to chime in?
Yeah, I titled this one Projecting and Reflecting, since it was on the anniversary of George Floyd's death. And I will say, as an aside, I come up with the titles for the photos for the print exhibition at the library, and it is one of my absolute favorite things to do all year.
And they're really good. So when you go to the library to see these, know that it was Greg that came up with all the clever titles. It's another thing he's a wizard at.
Greg and Michelle make us look good.
Next. Yeah, this one is Brianna. This lovely portrait is Brianna's.
Yeah, this was a story about Kerrigan. She's a student, and this was a story about she was boycotting a class because she opposed one of the books that was being used in the curriculum because her and her mother, Erin, felt that it kind of contributed to negative stereotypes about living with a disability. So it was like, she's this really like brave activist, really. I mean, that's what she considers herself. And I got to their house, and she didn't want to be in a photo when I got there. And so I called Michelle, and I was like, hey, I'm not going to force her. Her mom obviously doesn't want to force her, so I don't think this is going to happen. And I think you were kind of like, all right, I mean, there's something we can do. But I stayed for a little longer. Erin was like, maybe, so I just stayed and talked. And eventually she came back outside because she could hear us talking about, her activism and stuff. And she sat down next to her mom, and this moment happened just for like a few seconds. I didn't ask them to do this. And it just kind of came together, and I thought it turned out really nice, and it's kind of a beautiful little moment.
I think that it's something that most people who don't do photography realize, but sometimes the most important part of an assignment in a portrait like this can be just talking with your subject or the people and developing that connection that puts them at ease. And Brianna, I think that's something you're really good at, is going into these sort of somewhat difficult situations and taking the time to talk with people, and they get comfortable with you, and then you put them at ease, and it makes moments like this possible. It's not just showing up, and this photo wouldn't happen if you hadn't put the time into it.
Yeah, thank you. And I also just feel like, I had already told Michelle, like, this is probably there was really no pressure, right? Like, it wasn't, I mean, if it didn't happen, it didn't happen, but it did. And so I think also like the not desperation can be felt, maybe, I don't know.
I have to say that, there are lots of times when I'm desperate for a photo for a local page, and a photographer doesn't have much time, and I say, you have to find something. Yeah. And people come up with wonderful pictures, even when they're really under a time crunch. Okay, this is Greg's, and a gorgeous photo it is.
So this is at Cape Porpoise Harbor. I live about 7 miles away from here, across the river in Kennebunk, but I've been at the Press Herald for almost 25 years, and I have gone to Cape Porpoise Harbor often because I think it's one of the prettiest working harbors in southern Maine. And there's so much visual potential there. And I have photographed skiffs at this dock so many times over the years. And that's one of the things is being a longtime photographer is like trying to find new ways to look at things. That this straight down view, I think really sort of changed it up for me. And it just looked so different from any photo I had made previous of these skiffs at this dock that it became my favorite, just really because of its simplicity and the repeating patterns. It's one of my favorites of the year, actually.
And the way we chose the photos for this year's photos of the year was a little different. We all voted on each other's photos. So there were 6 votes for every photo. And then the top 5 from each photographer are what you're seeing tonight, basically. Okay, next. This wonderful, wonderful photo is Laugh Out Loud, and it's from Derek Davis. Derek?
Yeah, this was an early morning assignment for an outdoors story. I was sent up north to a dog training place where people were going with their dogs to get them ready for this big competition, this national competition that they were going to compete in. These dogs flush out birds and then retrieve them. And this was an awesome assignment. I was so psyched to be on it, but it was really challenging to photograph. I had to walk behind the dog's trainer and another person who was judging them. And I didn't really have a good view of what was going on, but I could see the dogs were running around in this tall grass and they would just come out of nowhere. I couldn't really see where they were going to be. So it was really kind of hard to capture them when they burst out of there. But probably on the second or third time I went out with someone and walked behind them, I just kind of got a feeling that the dog was coming at us, and I snuck around the guy's leg and got ready, and out burst this dog. It was perfect. And it was the only image, the only frame that I got that was like this, with the dog's ears flying back. And yeah, I was psyched about it.
He has the second sense. This is Ben's wonderful photo. And I have to say, Ben, in his writing about this, said, oh, this is never going to win any prizes. It's an easy photo to take. And I'm looking at it and I'm thinking, oh my God, this is not an easy photo to take. Only Ben would think that. But I'm going to turn it over to Ben now.
This is another case where the 100 to 400 came in really handy, because we take a lot of surfing shots, but it's tough to get somebody's face really up close. So the lens really helped with this. But I think what makes it for me is I had an opportunity to talk to this guy before he went into the water. This is at Higgins Beach in Scarborough. And he had just moved to Portland. It was only his 3rd time surfing. And he was a little nervous about being photographed. But he was a good sport. And he was just having so much fun. He was just getting pummeled out there. But that smile just says everything to me. He's just having the time of his life. Even, I just love his perseverance.
Yeah, Ben, it makes me want to give him a high five.
Wait to see what Greg captioned it, or his little kicker at the public library is. All the kickers are really great, but this isn't.
Yeah, you have to go and find it, everybody.
Yeah.
Ben, it's the Beach Boys song, Catch a Wave, and you're sitting on top of the world. It's like, he's okay with losing a wave. He's still on top of the world. Right. Which is not in the kicker, by the way.
Next. This is a wonderful one by Sean.
This was a regular season softball game between Scarborough and South Portland. And this was a big inning for Scarborough where they took a commanding lead. And I was just at that point, I had plenty of action photos. So I was just really watching the kids on the bench and I liked how all of them are reacting and they're all really into what's happening on the field. I like their body language, and I think that's what high school sports are all about.
Every single face in this photo is like a great expression. It's a really good reaction shot.
And Derek can maybe speak to this because he lives in Scarborough, but I love getting Scarborough sports assignments because it is a sports town and they love their high school teams, and the teams are just amazing and energetic. It's a joy to photograph any Scarborough high school sport.
I was just gonna say that the Scarborough kids are always good for reaction, and it is like amazing that every face is doing something, because like as we all know, in a crowd shot, I mean it's like really hard to actually get every face having like.
I mean, even if you're taking a portrait, think about it. How many times do you have everybody's eyes open? You know, somebody always has their eyes closed, let alone have these perfect expressions.
I think one of the things this photo does, it really shows like how the Scarborough teams are a team. Like they really are about teamwork and being a team, and because they are all into it.
Okay, let's go on to the next one. I love black and white. This is a Brianna photo from a prom. Surprise, surprise.
Shocking, shocking, another prom photo. No, I really do prom every year, and I really like it still, even after 5 years, I guess, or maybe 4, I can't remember. But this was Old Orchard Beach's prom. They actually had a prom in person, which I think was possible because it is such a small school. There really weren't that many kids there, and they weren't going to have dancing, but then they were able to like have a space outside. So this is a photo of them doing the Cupid Shuffle outside, which I thought was so funny because like that song was at my prom. So it's like a pretty old school song, but all the kids loved it. And I just really like this photo because like normally at a prom I'm not able to get like this far away, right? Like I'm not able to get, I'm like up on a deck and they're down, and I just thought it was nice to, you know, have a moment of kids having fun. I think they were all just really happy to be able to be at any kind of prom, even if it looked different than most years. So
not to plug the library show again, but I was helping Greg hang pictures, and the library show opens on Friday. But this is one of the ones that when you see it large, there's just so much more to see and explore. It's really worthwhile. There's the guy on the right adjusting his glasses.
Oh, see, I don't think I noticed that.
Yeah, you know, it's as a large print, it's really cool because you get to see their faces more, and there's such a range in there. It's so cool.
Cool. I'm excited to see it because I've just been seeing it on my tiny laptop screen. So
yeah, this is one that really, I mean, I wish we could have blown it up and, you know, made it as big as a whole wall. It's just really, you know, cries to be big. Okay, next. This is Greg.
Yeah, this was part of a project I worked on with reporter Tux Turkle, and it was about a group of ornithologists revisiting a area of the North Main woods where they had done a bird study. It was like 30 years ago. And they wanted to come back in because this area in this photograph had been, over the span of about a decade, completely clear cut. This, wherever you can see here, there were no trees 25, 30 years ago. And the wildlife biologists really were interested in the different areas of this clear cut have been managed differently over the years. And they wanted to see how bird species are attracted and what habitat they like in each of these areas. And the challenge for me was to sort of get the scope of like just how big this area is. And I have a drone, I don't fly it often, but it was really necessary to give that scope. And we had been out with the biologists all day, and at the end of the day, the two grad students who were leading the study went out jogging on this long road in opposite directions. And I knew, like, I'm like, okay, I don't think they're going to be gone long. And if I can, photos of environments, they are more often than not helped by some sense of human scale. And I remember thinking, I hope the battery lasts long enough for the grad student to come back to camp where we were staying overnight. And it did. And this is the shot that resulted.
And the scale is really, I mean, it's just a very powerful photo because of it. Next. This is Ben's.
This is another, Sean talked about A1 pressure. This started out as just a simple sports assignment. At least as I learned about the assignment, it was sports action. It's the Maine Mariners. It was their first game of the season. Not only that, it was the first game since the pandemic began. So sports wanted action. Sports wanted crowd shots, just to illustrate what it's like to have crowds in the arena again. And then they also wanted something for the front page. So I was a bit of a mess. I was losing hair at this moment, just rushing around. Oh, and photos needed to be in by the end of the second period. So there was a lot of pressure. But luckily, this kid was a lot of fun and was fairly oblivious to me standing right there with a camera and just going about doing his thing. So it was a, kind of rare, candid moment. Normally, kids are pretty attuned to where the camera is and want, throw up peace signs and want to be, at the center of attention. But this guy just really wanted a puck pretty badly.
That's great.
I think, Ben, you benefited from the fact that this was early in the season and the plexiglass was still clean. Later in the season, after they've been like being checked into it, it gets harder to shoot through the plexiglass because it becomes quite like marred up and scratched. And I think a week from the end of the season, this photo may have not happened.
Right.
The next photo is from Derek. And again, this is one that relies on a sense of scale, but also on really powerful graphic composition. Derek?
Yeah, this was an assignment to go out and find a feature for the next day. A little less pressure than Ben, because I had a little more time to work on it. But this is one of my favorite places to go. Down off the coast of Cape Elizabeth. This is Dyer Cove, where the lobster shack is. And I've made some images here before. This is like a little cave that you can kind of crawl into. And I was hoping that there might be some action happening in the cove, like a lobster boat out there or something. There was nothing. It was kind of a rainy day. But I backed myself into the cave, and luckily this little boy came along and ran out onto the rocks, and I was able to make this image that worked pretty well for the paper. So I kind of underexposed it a bit, which is why it's so dark. And that was kind of just an aesthetic choice of mine.
And I've been curious, and maybe the people who pay attention to technical details would be interested, but do you remember what lens you shot this with there?
I don't. I can tell you that it was a wide lens, but I do have a few wide lenses. Probably shot it with my 24-70. I'm a Canon shooter, and I have a 24-70 f2.8. And given the fact that it's not a very deep cave, so I wanted to try to get a wide angle that had that kind of rock edging going up into the skyline. I'm guessing that I probably used that lens for this shot.
Next. This is a beautiful one. This is Sean. Sean, are you there?
Apologies, I didn't unmute myself. This was a harvest moon. And as the moon was rising, I was in Camp Ellis waiting for the moon to come up. And I was looking for, something to put in the foreground to make an image. And then I saw these sailboats coming in. I was out on the jetty. And so I had to go back and climb off the jetty and run off onto the beach to try to get a good angle. And eventually I made this image.
It's a beautiful shot.
Did you know, did you use that app? What is it? Greg knows the name of the app, Ephemeris, maybe? Did you use?
I didn't. I know what you're talking about. And while I was there, I was wishing I had, because I didn't know where it was going to come up. And I was just kind of like hoping there would be something to work with, because the moon by itself might not make a great photo. But if you have another element like the sailboats, or a church steeple or, something. And so I didn't use the app. I just waited for it to come up. And then I adjusted to what was in front of me until I made this image. And then I called Michelle and told her I had it, because she hadn't planned on it. It was at the end of my shift, and she made room for it. I think it ran on the local page, but I'm not sure.
Yes, and they were thrilled to get it. Okay, next one. This is Brianna's photo.
Yeah, this was a pretty heavy and sad assignment. This is a memorial for Rhonda Padalina. I hope I'm saying her last name right. She's a woman who was murdered in York on the beach. And she was from Massachusetts, and a lot of her friends and family came up for a memorial. And this is, these are always tough, because you have to walk the line between like wanting to show the human element, like these are people who loved her, like this is like they're really feeling this loss, versus being respectful. And I think that's always like a tough line to walk. So I didn't get very many photos that night, but I thought this one, it worked to tell the story a bit. Yeah.
Next.
This is one of mine. Sorry, I jumped in. This is from near the summit of Saddleback Mountain. I just started skiing the East again. I grew up in Connecticut, and I skied New Hampshire and Vermont as a teenager, but I lived in Colorado for a while and went to college in Montana. And after skiing the West, I had really sort of soured on skiing the East when I came back and took the job at the Press Herald. And thankfully, my kids got me back into skiing about 3 years ago. And so I had not skied Saddleback before it reopened last year, and I really enjoyed it. And what I do when I'm skiing now, I going into the technical realm a little bit, 3 years ago, I switched to Sony mirrorless bodies. I shoot them exclusively now. And the mirrorless cameras are a little bit smaller. And I also switched all my lenses but one are prime lenses. And that keeps things smaller. And I have just a little pack that I ski with. And the benefit to that is I have a really good camera and a really good lens on me when pictures are happening. And when I got off the lift at the top and the sun was trying to break through, I was more attracted to that. I had been above alpine or above tree line before in winter, and I was familiar with rime ice. I was more attracted to the sun trying to break through, but just the absolute coating of everything in that rime ice was really interesting. And I think, Michelle, it was more like the editors and you sort of saw this and were amazed by it. And I do think that one of the things we forget as photographers, we may be used to a situation or a scene, but we need to remember as photojournalists, we're showing that to a lot of people who may have never even seen that. And I think this image is an example of that.
It definitely is. Next. I love this moment. This one's by Derek.
Yeah, so this was, I was out with a reporter, and we were talking to parents of of children that were heading back to school. And we were talking to this this woman, her son, and this is right about the time that the U.S. was pulling out of Afghanistan, I believe. And so we were talking to this mother, and we were going to interview the child. She didn't, I don't think, expect me to make this image, but she was talking to him and giving him a kiss right before he talked to the reporter. And luckily, I saw it happen and got my camera up and made the image, which turned out to be really great.
That perfect space between their two faces, you know, it's just
Yeah.
perfect.
You can tell the little boy he's pursing his lips. He's not trying to pull away from her or anything. He's
Yeah, and the way that
giving her a kiss.
they just fit with each other so perfectly. It's just, I love it.
And this was taken at the little pool at Deering Oaks Park in Portland.
Great. Next. This is one of Ben's.
Oh, this is Sean's, I think.
Oh, I'm
It
sorry.
looks like Ben's, you know, he had
It
the,
is Sean.
we almost didn't include this one because Ben had such a great surfing photo. I think, you know, they're different enough so that we could throw two in there. This was on a stormy day. You can see the wind blowing, the waves are blowing across the top of the wave there. I love, you know, how people in Maine get out regardless of the weather. I think Derek's a surfer. He could probably talk about that, but, you know, I just love seeing people get out regardless of the conditions.
It seems like surfing pictures are better in the winter than they are in the summer, actually, right?
Yeah.
At least in
Like
Maine.
Higgins Beach in Scarborough.
Surfing in general is better in the winter because the waves are more powerful, is what I am told.
Right,
Yeah.
right. Okay. This one says Sean, but this one is actually Ben's.
That's what happened.
Yeah.
So this, you know, this was the night after a storm. I forget what time of year it was, but there's a lot of pressure on the morning. I was working the 7 to 3 shift, 7 a.m. to 3 p.m. And there's a lot of pressure in the morning after a storm to get storm photos, and get them up right away, get them online as quickly as possible. And it's always a challenge to find something. This one I just stumbled on. I was taking my wife works on at Maine Med, and we were driving down Brackett Street, and lo and behold, here's the scene. And it's a group of line workers that are looking at a downed power line that was so hot it scorched the bricks. And I love these, you know, these line workers that are working with this powerful force every day, you know, putting their lives in danger somewhat. But generally speaking, you know, sort of a tough guy feel, and just them standing around in awe of this destructive power really grabbed me.
And this photo is really, the color is so important to it. It's this group and this kind of, with this warm orange light surrounded by blue, and because the orange it really draws your eye in, and you see all those broken bricks. It really, you know, works. The color really works to make you see the content. It's also really beautiful. So
Thanks.
next, this is Brianna's.
Yeah, this is a photo I took of Brother Arnold doing some of his daily chores with the sheep at Shaker Village. And I've gotten to know Brother Arnold a little bit through the last few years. I photographed him a few different times and been to Shaker Village a handful of times now. And I really love taking photos there. There's so much history there, you know. I wish I knew exactly how old the barn was, but it's like, 200 years old, and he knows so much. He's so knowledgeable. Anytime we ask, about a certain shaker, a certain time period. He always knows. So it's always really cool to take his photo, and it's always really fun to get to talk to him. So
I think that this one, I think, is the last of our singles. Is that right? Strawberry? Do we have? Yeah, so we have two stories we were going to look at. One was the pandemic story, and one was a story on Vinyl Haven. But we have only 5 minutes until we want to open it up to questions, and we do want to have time to take your questions. So I think that, we'll start looking at the pandemic pictures, but we're not going to finish, and we'll just stop when we get through, 5 or so of them, so that we do have time to answer some of the questions from the audience. The pandemic story that we did has 17 that we were going to show you has 17 pictures in it, and it's really a story about living just our ordinary lives during the last year. This is the second year of the pandemic. It is different than the first year. Things did open up more. There was more to photograph. Our lives opened up somewhat, and yet it certainly wasn't back to the before times. And, of course, we had photos of people getting vaccinated when the vaccines came, but some of the more interesting photos are just how daily life looked different. And this one's by Brianna, and it's a vaccine clinic set up in a gymnasium. And I think you can all remember back to when we wanted to get vaccines and how hard they were to get at the very beginning. Can we go to the next one, Strawberry? Yes, and this one's Sean. So maybe Sean can tell us what this one is about.
This was taken last winter. This was a hockey team, and they were asked to dress outside of the ice arena rather than in the locker room because of the pandemic. And so I arrived early, and I have this coach, and I think he's also the father of the girl, holding a light so that she could see as she was putting on her skates and her outfit before she went in to practice. And that just shows what it was like for teens during the pandemic.
Next. This is a wonderful one by Greg. Greg?
This is at a restaurant in Kennebunkport called Stripers, and it was for a story about how restaurants were adapting to the pandemic and just trying to do whatever they could to keep their businesses afloat. This restaurant happens to be on the lower part of the Kennebunk River, quite a scenic view. So they took advantage of their back deck, and they put 2 of these igloos up on the deck, and the wait staff would go in there, and they would take orders and people would eat from there. And it turned out to be quite popular. The restaurant had a pretty good year, and if I understand correctly, the igloos have proved so popular that the restaurant is keeping them up this winter, and may keep them permanently to let people still enjoy outside dining through the winter.
That's right. I talked to the manager and the owner, and he told me that. So, and this is pretty obviously a
yeah.
content.
This was a vaccination clinic out on Peaks Island on a Sunday afternoon. 2 nurses from Northern Light Health were going out, but there were some retired doctors on the island. And it really was a community effort to get the clinic up and running, but also people from the island, whether they were medical professionals or retired or doing anything, making food, baking. It really showed me like how an island, when there's a need, the island comes together. And Ben might be able to speak to this a little bit because he lives out on Peaks, but I was really impressed with the community spirit that day.
Can we see the next one? I love this one. Derek.
Sorry, this was last year's St. Patrick's Day. And this was the first time I had been in a bar since the beginning of the pandemic. I was a little nervous that I got assigned to go photograph this, but when I got there, there really weren't that many people there, and all the doors were open and all the windows, so it was well ventilated. These two folks here were from a dance group that were entertaining the patrons. And it was just kind of, it was kind of cool actually to be out and about and watching people have fun.
Yep. This is Brianna's. Brianna.
Yeah, this was a swim meet at Cape Elizabeth, and this was, last winter, and there was no one there. There was not even another team. They were just swimming and then timing themselves and sending in the time. So, it was kind of a weird swim meet to photograph, because usually, you're getting all that excitement and stuff. So I just kind of saw this moment of them, they got out of the pool, they had to throw their mask back up as they were walking back. And I thought this was kind of just a weird moment that speaks to the time that we were in.
I love it for that very reason. I mean, this is that odd moment in an ordinary life that is so different from before time. And, this is when people look back. I mean, these photos are really history in the making, and think of it 50 years from now or 100 years from now, when people look back, these photos are going to be very telling about what it was like. Oh, this one too. This is a great one by Sean. There's something poignant about it. It should, she's smiling. It's a happy moment, and yet it's so odd to see her all alone. Sean?
This was the graduation ceremony at the University of Southern Maine in Portland. And they did it in an empty auditorium. So they would call up each graduate one at a time. They would go up and hold their diploma, have their photo taken, and then walk off the stage. It was kind of a strange moment. There might be a person or two in the back waving at them, family members. I think they let a few people in for that moment, but then they had to leave for the next person to come in. And it was really kind of strange to be there. I'm glad I could witness it.
Okay, I think that as much as I hate to stop, that maybe we should move on to some questions so that we do have some time to take more questions. And if we run out of questions, we can always come back. So I'm going to look at the first question I'll ask is one that came in from somebody when they registered, and it could be directed to any of you. Which photo of yours has received the most reaction, positive or negative? And it doesn't necessarily have to be a photo in Photos of the Year. I think it can be any photo. And does anyone have one in mind?
I've got some visual aids here, because I just happen to be at the office. This is another one of my favorites that I didn't care for when I first took it, but this is from 2017. It's another eclipse photo taken on Old Orchard Beach. I don't know what more could be said about it, but I really.
Ben, what could be said about it is it's the best eclipse photo that doesn't show the eclipse that I've ever seen.
Also, a lot of other people liked it because it won a really big award, national award. So, I mean, yeah, I love that photo, and I think like a lot of people reacted to it, and you were surprised by that, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Including us. We were all like, "Whoa."
Yeah. Does anyone else have a photo that comes to mind where you had really a lot of reaction from people, either positive or negative?
I think still to this day, probably the most well-known photo I've ever taken was in April of 1996, which was the year in between my summer internship at the Press Herald in the year I started as a full-time photographer at the Press Herald. I was still a student at the University of Montana, and we got a report that the Unabomber was being arrested in Lincoln, Montana, which was about a 2-hour drive away from the university. And 3 of my photojournalism student friends and I got the only images of Ted Kaczynski on the night of his arrest, in which he looks like the wild mountain man that he lived his life like. And to this day, people still know me for that photo. And the 4 of us, the 4 of us became known shortly after that photo hit all the international papers as the Unabomber boys. And there are still places where I go where somebody will say, "Oh, you're one of the Unabomber boys." So that's my photo, for better or for worse.
One of the easy to answer questions is what time we'll be at the photo exhibit at the library. And so the exhibit is open on First Friday in January and in February at First Friday from 5 to 8 p.m. It's also open, you can go and see it during regular library hours, but on the first Fridays, there will be some photographers there. We won't have a full staff, but we will have 2 or 3 photographers, or as many as we can, who we can get there this Friday. So you should check with the library though in the morning, check their website before you go, because we are expecting a storm on Friday. And if they close, they will probably, if they decide to close the library because of the storm, they'll probably announce it, by 8 o'clock in the morning. So before you would, if you come, just check and make sure that the library is actually open.
Right. In addition to that, I would add that if you plan on going to the library to see the exhibit outside of the opening or first Friday in January, February, do go to the library's website, because they are operating on reduced hours. And they're only open for about 4 hours each day. So go to their website. They have their hours right on their homepage, so that you don't go there expecting it to be open. And they're a little bit different. Some days are earlier in the day, some days are later. So go to their website and check their hours before you go to see the exhibit. And please do go see the exhibit, if for no other reason to see other than to see my very catchy titles and the really big prints.
We have 2 questions that are kind of similar. One from Kathy, when you photograph people, do you usually get permission to publish the picture? And another one, do you always ask people before taking their photos? So I'll just answer part of the question by saying that if you're in a public place, you don't have to ask for permission. And if, obviously, if we're shooting a crowd, it is impossible to. But I'll let the photographers answer how they deal with other situations.
I would say almost maybe 85% of the time we will check in with people if it's a feature we're shooting, and see, because if at all possible, we want to try to get their name. And when we do talk to them, there is, it doesn't happen often, but it does happen where people say, I would really rather not have my photo in the paper. And if it's just a general feature, and they're really, they don't even have to tell us what the reason is, but if they're really adamant and we don't need that particular photo, like we can go find another feature, we'll certainly try to honor that. There are also situations, to go to the other extreme, we may be photographing a defendant in court, and that person certainly would probably rather not have their photo in the newspaper, but we don't need that person's permission to put the photo in the newspaper. It's news. And I mean, the bottom line is in a public setting, if someone is doing something in a public setting, the First Amendment covers our right to photograph them doing what they're doing now.
I should speak to this a little bit because I'm the one who flubbed up this year and didn't get those names. That photo never ran in print, I think for that reason. And it only appeared online in a gallery of other summertime images.
That he's referring to his photo of the
Couple
Oh,
at the
couple
Ossipee
at the
Fair.
there, right. Yeah, so because we didn't have the names, we didn't use it in print. That's true. Does anyone else want to speak to that? No. Here's another interesting question that isn't easy to answer. Do you try to establish an identifiable personal style? I mean, I think a lot of people try to enjoy looking at pictures and trying to guess who took them, or feel like they know a photographer's style enough to say, oh, that's by Brianna, or oh, that's by Sean. But I don't know that, it's an interesting question. Have you tried to establish a style, or is it just like your handwriting? It's individual to who you are.
I don't think I really have. I just know that every time I got yelled at in photo school for centering things, I still did it anyway. Like I just was like, well, I'm still gonna do it. So I don't know if that was the start of me not listening to the rules, but yeah, I don't really think that I try. I don't know. I mean, I definitely think we're all inspired, right? Like when you start taking photos, you look at people's work that you like. And I think subconsciously or consciously, you know, I don't want to say copy it, but you're definitely inspired by it. So I think that's maybe like how you get started, but then you kind of just move toward your own thing. I don't really think about it very much, I guess.
Right. I think that's a good explanation. I remember in college, I was really attracted to the work of William Albert Allard in National Geographic. And I do think my early photography tried to mirror, like you admire someone and you try to figure out how they're doing that and how they do what they do. But when you do this job every day, that creative process is almost, at least for me, and Brianna was just alluding to this, we don't really think about what we're doing. It's more operating in our subconscious. I don't, and I'll get calls from family members or relatives saying, I knew that was your photo before I even saw the byline. But I don't consciously go after a certain style. I just sort of, I call it getting in the zone. And when I'm in the zone, things just happen and I'm not really thinking about it much. It just happens, which is a terrible explanation, but that's how it works for me.
Here's a wonderful question from an anonymous attendee. You spend your time capturing interesting and precious life moments. Can you talk about that and what it adds to your own life? Brianna?
Sorry, I didn't realize I was typing an answer. So yeah, I saw this one and I was like, oh, that's really good, because I feel like I talk about this a lot, like how I just feel so lucky to get to do this job. And I don't want to say I feel bad for everybody else, but like, you get like these little views, and sometimes longer than little views, of other people's lives. And it's honestly, such, I feel so grateful for that, because I feel like it really opens your mind. You have a chance to really get to hear so many different people's perspective. And I think it's been really healthy and good for me just as a person, to get a chance to do that, especially during like all these kind of crazy times that we're living in. So for me, I mean, I almost feel bad because I feel like I'm getting so much out of it too, maybe more than anyone else.
I think that often when we're out on assignment or when we're just around town photographing people, it gives us a chance to strike up a conversation and meet people that we wouldn't normally meet. Like today, I photographed someone, and I'm not going to give it away because the picture hasn't been published yet, but I made some photographs, but ended up staying and having a long conversation with the the gentleman that I was photographing. And it wasn't an assignment or anything, but it was someone that I never would have met if I wasn't out there, looking for a photo for the paper. So it was great. It definitely enriches our lives to be able to do this job.
Yeah, I'm an introvert, like big time, and this job sort of forces me out of my comfort zone, gets me to meet people every day, and I think especially during the pandemic, if I was working from home or something like that, I'd be a total recluse. But during this period, it's the work has never slowed down. There's never been a day when I haven't met somebody new or had a different experience. It's really, we're very lucky.
Here's an easier question to answer. Favorite camera or favorite lens? Anybody want to chime in there?
I have to say, it seems odd. I shot Canon for over 20 years, and a former staffer, Gabe Souza, lent me his Sony mirrorless body for a week. And I was so blown away by its technical capabilities and how clean the images were. At the end of the week, when I had to give him the camera back, I told him, I remember saying this, I feel like I'm giving my Superman cape away, and so one of the things, I don't want to get into it too deep, but one of the things about mirrorless camera bodies that is really amazing is you can shoot them with silent shutters. And so when you take the picture, the camera doesn't make a noise at all. And as photojournalists, often our job is to be a fly on the wall. And say, for instance, if you're in an elementary school classroom, which we haven't been in much over the past 2 years, but as soon as that shutter sound goes, the kids all hear that, and it changes the dynamic. When you can make a photo and not make a sound and not impact the scene that you're trying to document, that was game changing for me. So over the past 3 years, I've just gone all in on Sony's, and I have 3 Sony bodies, and I also changed things up to a bunch of prime lenses, which after being in, photojournalism for 25 years, shooting mostly with primes has really sort of put my brain into a different place, which is a darn good thing.
Sean, what about you? Do you have a favorite lens, favorite camera?
I'm a Nikon guy. I've been photographing with Nikon for 30 years, from film cameras to DSLRs, and now I use a mirrorless. I shoot with 2 Nikon Z6s. I think it's the Z6, Z6. And I like them for the same reason Greg pointed out. I love the silent shutter. When you go into court, for instance, you really don't want to be attracting a lot of attention on yourself. You want to just let things happen. And when you're in a really silent room, that shutter is so loud. And to be able to shoot multiple frames, I used to just shoot, only a few images, but now I can kind of let it go because it's not making any noise. So I feel like it really makes for better photos. And
the detail is incredible too. I was mentioning this to Ben earlier today, putting up the photos. I was putting on the Scarborough softball reaction photo on the wall. And when you look at that really close on that big print, the sharp detail is amazing. And I remember turning around to Ben, I'm like, Sean shot this on his Z. I know he did. Because the detail is amazing.
What about you, Brianna? Do you have a favorite lens or?
I tend to use my 35 the most, probably too much, honestly. But I like how I kind of like how it just feels like what my eye would see. Like it doesn't feel so like you need to have a 24-70 in my opinion, because sometimes you're in a really small room. But I like how the 35 just kind of feels, for me, kind of just like what my eye would see. So I like that a lot. And I just like how it looks. I mean, for me, like, I don't really know that much about tech stuff. Whenever I get asked questions, I feel like I don't really know the answer all the time, but I just want what's easy, what like works well. So I want to use it. And I have one mirrorless and I have two mirrorless, I guess, and then I have my regular camera, my Mark IV, and I use them all. And I will say though, the mirrorless has made a difference. I mean, it's much easier I like how I can see everything in my viewfinder now, and I find myself exposing things more properly because before, I would mess stuff up a lot. So,
well, I am going to ask you one other technical question. I don't see it on our list anymore, but it was there about the flash you used.
Well, that's what I was typing an answer to when I wasn't. But yeah, I basically don't know what flash it was. It's just it was some random kind of off-brand one I got for a couple $100. Greg actually, oh wait, it starts with a G? You asked me about it once. It was like a Godex or something, maybe. It's just coming back.
Godex.
I love it.
Godex, yeah. Wow, it just came out of my brain.
Yeah, good.
Yeah, I was like, Greg, G. Okay. Yeah, so, and it's just like a direct flash. I don't use flash very much, so I use it when I need it, basically, or when I think it'll look cool. So.
Somebody asked what we mean by prime lens versus other, and a zoom lens is a lens that changes focal length. So it might go from a 24, which is a wide, to a 70, which is a very small telephoto. But a prime lens only is one focal length. So if you want to get closer or further away, you have to move yourself instead of just moving your lens. You have to walk closer or move back to change the view of the camera.
And one of the other things about prime lenses is that most zoom lenses will have a maximum aperture of 2.8 or f4. And a lot of the primes will go much wider than that because they don't have as much, as many elements in them. So most of my primes, I have a 50 1.2, a 35 1.4. And so that wider aperture actually, it helps to throw your background out of focus more. It's particularly helpful when doing portraiture. And that's another key advantage to primes is they often have wider apertures.
Do you have a favorite, Derek?
Favorite lens? I like my super primes, but I have a 35 millimeter 1.4. That's, I guess, my most expensive prime lens, but I really love, I have a 28 1.8, and it's so light and small that you can just stick it in your pocket, your back pocket or whatever, and carry it around with you in case you need it. I love that lens. Probably my favorite.
Ben?
People ask me, hey, what are you shooting? And half the time I have to look down to remind myself what the numbers are, or the letters, or the name of the camera. So I'm not much of a gearhead. In fact, so Greg at some point, after he got into a Sony kick, sold me one of his Sony cameras, and that for me was kryptonite. Luckily he bought it back for me because I couldn't work with the mirrorless. It was just too much. It was like, I don't know. I guess like old school meat potatoes.
Your hands were too big for that camera. That's the little camera I take skiing with me now.
Right. Hot dog fingers.
Here's a different kind of question that I like. How have you been able to balance a newspaper career with your personal life? I left newspapers more than 15 years ago because I found it to be incompatible with having a family. Anybody want to take that on? Sean?
Well,
Yeah, I can't really speak to it because I don't have a family. So.
It's definitely challenging, the schedule that we have. And when you start off as a photojournalist, at least when I did, and probably all of you, it really wasn't a 40-hour-a-week job. You were working before your shift started, and you were working after. You were trying to find stories to work on. And then as I got older and I had a family, I'm like, okay, I got to try to squeeze this into a 40-hour week or closer to a 40-hour week. But then you have the changing schedule, you're working nights and working weekends and trying to balance that with the family life. And that can definitely be a challenge. If I didn't love what I do, I wouldn't do this. I would definitely, find something else. But I love what I do. I love the daily assignment. So you try to make it work. And I
Derek,
have a very, forgiving family, a loving family that understands, I got to work this Saturday. I'm covering, the state championship football game, and they think that's cool and they understand. I get a day off during the week and try to spend time with them then.
Derek, you have 3 teenagers, right?
Yeah, I do. I have 3 teenagers, and I'm hoping that Sean's going to tell me, once they graduate and go off on their own, it gets a lot easier. But I'm muting myself right now.
It's definitely challenging. It's their schedules are super busy, and I still have one child that isn't old enough to drive. So she's playing 2 sports and got lots of friends and places to be. So needs rides everywhere, and I want to make all their events, and that's tough when you're working a changing schedule. But they also enjoy that I do this for a living, because I get to go photograph their sports teams and their friends and do all that kind of stuff too. So it's rewarding and challenging at the same time.
I do think there's an element of that. I mean, what we do as photojournalists is so unique and fairly rare that, and I think our families see that we enjoy what we do so much. And I think that makes a difference to them. And it sort of helps mitigate the times when we're not here or whatever stress we might bring home. But it's been hard. I will say, it's been a little easier for me. So 2 of our oldest just started their freshman year at college, and that has made things a little bit easier. It's been even easier now that they're home for winter break, that they can sort of take care of things that I'm not home to deal with, which has been great. But yeah, it's really hard, and that balancing act takes a lot of work, and it doesn't always come out perfect.
Okay, so I think we only have time for maybe one more question, and it's going to be a short one. And it's, do you ever go back and shoot film for fun? Well, first of all, I think there are only a couple of us here that are old enough to go back to shooting film, because I don't think many people here ever started with shooting film. I mean, I know that Greg and I did, but did you start with film, Sean?
I did. Yeah, I worked in the darkroom for the first few years.
You did. And what about you, Derek? Did you?
Yes, too many hours in the darkroom. Too many hours.
Yeah.
I don't miss that.
Yeah. I mean, I went to Ghana on a freelance assignment a couple of years ago, and I actually decided I was going to shoot digital, but for myself, I was going to take my old Mamiya 6, which is a 2.25 film camera. And I went out and I bought the film, and I was really excited about doing it. I thought I'll do a little personal project. And then I was testing it out, and the camera was broken. It wouldn't work, and I couldn't get it fixed in time. So, so I didn't do it. But, I am really glad to be out of the dark room. But I remember black and white film very, very fondly. There was a really, really beautiful quality to black and white prints that that you can now get with digital. It's just different.
Yeah.
I may be chastised for this, but just last week I was sort of clearing stuff out, and I came across a Ziploc bag of film that I had shot, and it had to be from the mid-90s. And I'm sure that people were going to give me guff for this, but I said to myself, there's nothing I shot on this film that's going to be worthwhile, and I don't want to process it. And I tossed it. It was about 15 rolls.
The hoarder in me cannot believe you did that. And
I
also
have
the
to tell
photographer,
you,
both
have-
sides of me.
I have more than one baggie of film waiting to be developed. More
Yeah.
than one.
Sometimes I just have to let go of the past. I don't know. I may have let a gem go, but I'm thinking not.
Well, I think, it's been really great to talk with everybody. And I would encourage all of our viewers, if you're stuck in this long, to subscribe to the Portland Press Herald. If you don't, it's really, really unusual and wonderful to have a newspaper support a photo staff like this. And the work we do is so important. And, thank you. Thank you very much for letting us be able to do this work that we love so much. And see you next year.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank
Thank you.